that yet, when you think you have it, um, just hold on to it. I'm going to give you a few moments here to take a look at this and see if you can discern the pattern, if you can discern the organizational scheme for this list of words and phrases. All right. If you think you've got it, go ahead and put it in the chat. There we go. Yep. Yes. Excellent. Yes, it is indeed associated with numbers. It's in a numeric order. $1, two dice, unless you're playing D&D, then you're going to have lots more. Three wheels on a tricycle, four leaves on a clover, so and so. All the way through 15, quarter hour is 15. Excellent. Now, I'm going to give you another 30 seconds, and I want you to write down how many words and phrases you remember this time. Don't look at the list. Begin. And we've got 5 seconds. Time. It looks like from the chat, if you haven't put your number in, go ahead. Ooh, Carolyn got 9. Awesome. Did most people improve? I'm assuming yes, from the numbers I'm seeing here. We improved. We got better. So the question becomes why? Why did we get better? Well, because our focus shifted. I intentionally misled you with the focus the first time we looked at this. But once we saw the patterns, once we saw the information, once we could think about something like the level of difficulty, it's much easier just to find the vowels, but you knew the level of difficulty the second time we went through this. Things changed. I'm Michelle Blank Rentz, and I am at Goshen College, where I serve as the Director of Academic Success. And one of the courses I am privileged to teach at least 2 times. This semester, I'm teaching it 3 or 4 times. Every semester is metacognitive learning strategies. This is a course that we put into play a couple years ago. And it's a 1-credit course that students can take, are encouraged to take, that helps them learn how they learn. Aside from the course, many of our faculty, myself included, as I teach in the communication and education departments as well, have threaded many of these ideas into our classes, even if we only use one of the strategies I talk about today. It helps our students to capture this new information about how they learn. When I ask students how they learn, what they do, they'll say things like, well, I reread. Well, learning science tells us let's maybe move away from that. All of the strategies we're going to look at today are based in learning science. They're based in cognitive psychology. And one of the things we know is it's very helpful for our students, for our learners, and you're the students today, to know where we're headed. And one of the ways I love to do that, along with some other things, is a what, why, how. I actually have my students in many of my classes break their assignments down into a what, why, how. At first, I started giving them a what, why, how for their assignment sheet. And then I thought, let's teach them how to do this. So I show them, we do an I do, we do, you do type of thing where I show them what a what, why, how looks like. Then we do them together. Then as the course progresses, they're making every assignment from their other courses as well into what, why, hows. The what is for students, what are you going to submit? What are you being asked to submit? So for us, it's our focus, concepts and strategies to help students become better learners. The why, well, Dr. Stephen Chu, who I'm a huge fan of, tells us that college students prefer to use suboptimal learning strategies when they study, even if they know they're suboptimal. So we can't fight the battle if we don't let them know, then it's up to them if they're going to use them or not. But we can encourage that. And that's one of the things we're going to look at. And then the how. When students break down an assignment, their how is often just a priority list. What do I need to do first? What do I need to do second? And for us, it's the 5 strategies or kind of concepts that we're going to take a look at today. Brain files, engaging Drew, Bloom's level, retrieval practice, and spaced practice. So that's our plan for our journey. What it looks like along the way, who knows? Every time is different because we all bring our own experiences to this, and what you experience, what you pull from this will be different than what the next person pulls. This is all about your students and their success. So let's jump right in. Our first big concept, and I did put in the chat a link to an advanced organizer that has kind of these concepts and some space for you to write, a lot of icons. We know from cognitive psychology that dual coding, using pictures and words together, helps us to hold on to information, makes it stickier for us. So I've given you that advanced organizer. I would suggest using an advanced organizer in every one of your classes. My partner Jeremy is a civil engineering professor. He's actually presenting at this conference later on a different day, but he has a handout for every class, and it's an advanced organizer to help his students hold on to the information. So our first concept, learning is memory. At base, learning, when we really break it down, is new information getting stuck onto the old information, which is memory. So anything that applies to memory, any of you who have seen the kind of the memory model that's been around forever and ever, anything that applies to memory applies to learning. So concept 1 is brain files. And you may have at some point heard the term schema theory. That's what brain files are. I actually teach this to all of my students, partly because I got tired of hearing, well, Professor so-and-so makes us do this reading and then they just go over the same thing. Yes, they do. And there's a reason for that. So when I teach this in my classes, and if we were doing this in person, we would do a little role play, because role play is one of the practices that helps us hold on to information. And I often will just give my students basic schema theory. So you're a 2-year-old and you're in the park with grandma and you see this little animal that's yellow and you touch it and it's fluffy and it's got little pointy ears and a tongue and 4 legs. And when you pet it, it goes meow. And you look at the more knowledgeable other, grandma in this case, and grandma says that's a cat. And your brain, my brain, all brains make this folder and they label it cat and put those characteristics in there. The next day, because grandma's a good grandma and takes you to the park, you see another little creature that looks similar and 4 legs and pointy ears and a little tongue, and it's yellow, and you touch it and it's fluffy, and you're about to say cat, and this little creature goes woof woof, and your mind goes, because your schema just got blown. Your little brain says, hold on, that's not what's in my cat folder, so I'm not sure what to do with this. And you look to grandma, to that more knowledgeable other, and grandma says, that's a dog, and your brain goes, oh, okay, and it makes a new folder and it labels it dog and it puts those characteristics in there, and then it connects it to the cat folder. It kind of makes a Venn diagram. These things are the same, these things are different. So not literally, of course, but our brain is full of these file folders, and over time your cat folder gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I ask my students, what else goes in your cat folder? Well, not all cats are yellow, or tigers are cats. And so we talk about how that has grown, and then we apply it. Why does Professor Smith tell me to do this reading and then they talk about the same thing? Because doing the reading before class creates your file folder. Then when you get to class, your brain can sort through and go, Here's the one we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be adding to. So when Professor Smith starts talking, starts lecturing, starts having you do whatever activities you're doing in class, your brain folder is open and that information has somewhere to land. So why is the reading before class important? Brain files, schema theory. Another application of this concept is in the study cycle. I teach all of my students the study cycle, and in the Metacog class, I actually give them extra credit for applying this in their other courses. So that first chunk there, the preview, this is where schema theory becomes so important. If you can get to class 5 minutes ahead, you don't have to do this for an hour, 5 to 15 minutes. And you look back over your notes, you look back through the slides, you look at the assignment you did, 5 minutes, that gives your brain time to search through, find the correct file folder, and be ready to add that information. The last strategy that we talk about connected to brain files or schema theory is this idea of elaboration that when I have students make notes, and I always use the term make notes instead of take notes because take notes can be very passive and we want them engaged and making notes. We don't want them copying down what is on my PowerPoint. I'm going to give them my PowerPoint. I want them elaborating. I want them connecting to something that is unique to them, some experience they've had. So that elaboration helps them hold on to that new information because we know if the new information isn't connected to old when we sleep, that new information's gone. But what got connected, we can hold on to. So then we relearn. That's just the learning cycle. That's why it's important to give ourselves plenty of time. But this idea of elaboration connects to schema theory. So teaching and reinforcing this, like I said, we do the role play so that I can explain basic schema theory to them. We use lots of concrete examples like the ones I just gave you. The more we can connect to concrete examples, the better we're going to hold on to information. I give every class reminders. Hey, give your brain time to open up to that right file folder so that we're ready to put stuff in there. Are you doing this? And then we have to remember that inspected practice matters. People are going to do what we inspect, not what we expect, unfortunately. So if I want them to be using elaboration in their notes, I collect those notes and look for the elaboration. I don't have to understand it. They can draw, they can put things. It's not my notes, it's their experience. So I don't have to understand it. I just have to see that elaboration is there. So that's our first concept. The second concept is this: the doer is the learner. We know that learning styles is a neuromyth, and while we may feel comfortable when we are learning visually, we're all visual learners, we're all auditory learners, we're all kinesthetic learners, and we know that when we're doing is when we're learning the most, when we're putting something into practice because we're moving up Bloom. So the doer is the learner. And there's actually a video that I use in my classes. I've referenced it on the reference slide at the end of this slide deck. Veritasium put out about 7-8 years ago about System 1 and System 2 learning. And so this concept is tied to System 2 learning. And System 2 in the video is named Drew. So with the students, we call this engaging Drew. So System 1 thinking is, well, you can see from the picture, it's fast. It's our multitasker, even though it's not really a thing. But System 1 is that part of our brain that's connected to long-term memory that makes some assumptions based on our previous experience. So it's things, it's fast, it's automatic, it's emotional, it's unconscious. We might say this is muscle memory. Those are the things that I really don't have to think too much about. And what we know is students can copy down what's on a slide pretty much using System 1 without really having to think about it. So that's why I insist on making notes. System 2 thinking, we've got our icon of a thinker here. And again, dual coding, connecting pictures and words to help us hold on to these ideas. System 2 is slow, effortful, logic, conscious, and it's where learning happens. but system 2 is lazy. In the video, system 2 wants to sit in an easy chair and doesn't want to get up and do anything. But we know that, again, gross oversimplification, but the way kind of our brain works is system 2 learns the thing and eventually, after doing it many, many, many times, passes it off to system 1. So things like tying your shoes. When you're a child learning to do that, or maybe not a child, you're using up all of your working memory to remember the steps, but after you've done it, it gets passed off. We see this with athletes. We see this with musicians. If any of you drive, you probably should engage system 2 when you're driving, but likely don't. If you've done it for a long time, have you ever driven somewhere and you get there and don't remember driving there, like you don't remember the route because you've done it so many times? But system 2, this lazy part of us, is where learning happens. System 1 doesn't learn. System 1 just gets things passed off to it. System 2 is where the learning happens. So we have to engage system 2 for learning to take place. So one of the things I like to do with my students is this ABC 3-2-1 activity. And I'll just kind of walk you through it quickly. I have a volunteer come up and I ask the students, you have to know your ABCs in English and you have to be able to count backwards from 10 to 1. And so I asked the one student to say their ABCs A to J as fast as they can, and another student times them. And usually it takes about 3 seconds. And we all applaud. And then I ask them to please count backwards from 10 to 1 as fast as they can. Another student times them, and that usually takes somewhere around 3 seconds as well. Then I ask them to do them together. So they're going to say 10 A, 9 B, 8 C. So they're counting backwards and saying their ABCs, just interleaving them together. We should be able to do this, right? Well, what we know is the first 2 activities are system 1 thinking, and this activity is system 2 thinking. You're actually having to engage system 2 to be able to do this, and you can watch students pupils dilate. There might be some sweat produced in the armpits, and these physiological kind of manifestations of Drew is having to get up out of that chair and do something. And it usually takes students, usually they'll make it through it. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay too. We just kind of go, oh yeah, it's hard to do. And I tell them I've done this with many PhDs who had trouble making it through it. It's not necessarily a simple activity. And it usually will take them somewhere around 20 to 25 seconds to get through that. And so it's fairly short, but shows them system 1 and system 2 and kind of what's going on. So the more we can show them, the easier it'll be for them to hold on to it. So a couple ways we apply this, the doer is the learner. I use 2-column notes in my class. And you may have heard of these as Cornell notes, but I use 2-column notes where students in one column put a question, and that's essential. They can't just put concept maps. They have to put what are concept maps, or how do I use concept maps, because system 1 doesn't make questions. System 2 makes questions. So we're going to engage a little more than if we just made put the topic rather than turning it into a question. And then I have them answer that question. Now, some students will say, I do notes this way, and I'm comfortable doing it that way in class. And if I'm trying to do the 2 columns in class, it feels like too much and I miss what's going on. I totally understand, and that's valid. So what I invite them to do is make notes the way you always have them, the way you're comfortable in class, and then reorganize them into the 2-column format. We know that every time we reorganize information, we're holding on to more of it. So they learn even more if they kind of do it their own way and then reorganize into the 2 columns. We do add a section at the bottom where we have them summarize the notes, what's on that page. Another way to apply this strategy is with concept maps. Same idea, make the notes in class and then turn it into a concept map. And then through teaching others, we talk a lot about learn mode or pass the test mode versus actual learn mode. And learn is when we know we can teach others, because we're having to engage Drew, engage system 2 to pull that information out and recall it in ways that we can then tell it to others, share it with others so that they can understand. I've lost my cursor. There we go. So the ways that we teach and reinforce this, we do the ABC 3-2-1 like I showed you. I often will ask every class, sometimes multiple times, how are you engaging system 2 or how are you engaging Drew? And the kids know what that means. The students know what I'm talking about because we've spent some time on it. We do muscle memory examples. It's not uncommon in class for me to say, give me an example of muscle memory. And then we apply that to writing or communication or thinking or whatever it is we're doing. And again, inspected practice, required notes, concept maps, teaching presentations. We do a lot of short little teaching presentations during the class. All right, our third concept. We're doing okay on time. Third concept, people will choose the easiest path. I will choose the easiest path. You will choose the easiest path. Unless it's something we're really interested in, excited about, passionate about, we tend to choose the easiest path. And unfortunately, our students aren't all always passionate about our classes, not quite like we are. So this is where we bring in Bloom's levels. Yes, that Bloom's, that pyramid that you likely have seen where we're told use these verbs to write your learning objectives. We actually teach this to the students, and this really is something that Sandra McGuire worked a lot with. We know that many of our students study, if they're just left to their own devices, at the remember or maybe the understand level. They will make flashcards where they make sure they know the definition. They may think through, talk about in a study group, maybe guided by a study guide of some sort, move into understanding, but very seldom will they move into apply, analyze, or evaluate. And most of our exams are at apply, analyze, and evaluate. They have to know that lower level to do the higher level. But getting them to think about what level of Bloom's am I being asked to think at? Am I being asked to learn at? And then what are the things I have to know at the lower levels? I'll show you that Bloom's application in just a moment. But my favorite way to teach this is to start with Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And so in class, I quickly retell the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And then I start asking these questions, demonstrating for the students what a question at each of these levels might look like. And then there are times, at least in the Metacog class, that we revisit this idea, and I will maybe give an assignment that says, here's your topic that you're going to teach to the class. There are 3 of you in the group. Person A, you are going to write something about remembering and analyzing. Person B, you're going to do understanding and evaluating, so on and so forth, so that they are thinking about how to create their own questions, their own scenarios at each of these levels. My favorite is when we get to evaluating and I ask them to judge whether Goldilocks is good or bad. I just have them give a thumbs up or thumbs down, and then they have to defend their opinion. And almost every student will go with thumbs down and say that Goldilocks, a B&E charge, vandalism, trespassing, theft, all the things. Every now and then somebody will take the other side and be like, hold on, this is a child out in the woods alone. It's her parents' fault. But it lends to just a fun discussion about what does it mean to evaluate. And we kind of do that in a fun way. The other thing we do for applying this, and we do this often, is this Bloom's application. So this is an assignment that a student had from an Accounting 3 class. The assignment was Exam 3. The highest level of Bloom's they have to use to be successful on this assignment is creating. But then what do they have to do at every level below that? So if the highest level was applying, what would they have to do at remembering and understanding? But since we're all the way at the top, well, they have to remember the definitions of the terms and formulas. They have to understand, they have to make meaning of the scenario that's provided. This is an exam where the professor gives them a scenario. They have to take the concepts that they learned in class and use them to help resolve the problem in the scenario. They have to look at each part of the problem in the scenario and figure out how to resolve it. So they've got to take it apart and take a look at it, and so forth. So I have students break down assignments in my class and in other classes often. And in the Metacog class, I actually give extra credit for, all the times they will do this because I want them practicing. It's a class that's designed for practice in other classes. But I do this in my comm and education classes as well, having them break these down. And I have students come back and say, I'm doing my Bloom's applications and realizing what I need to do at each level so that I can then be successful. So as we reinforce this, that count the vowels activity from the beginning is a reinforcement. What level of Bloom's are we looking at when we're counting vowels versus when we're trying to remember, oh, I have to apply this pattern, then I can remember. We do Goldilocks, we do lots of Bloom's applications, and then we inspect that. I have them submit those Bloom's applications and engage in conversation about, okay, but what about here? You're also doing this just to get them to realize, because as Bob said in the beginning, many students don't really know how they learn. All right, the next concept, we remember what we practice remembering. We remember what we practice remembering. Our memories don't go away, they're still in there. But if we haven't been practicing bringing them back out, they fade. And learning is the same way. Think about if you maybe learned a language in high school. Do you still know that language? If you haven't had opportunity to practice it or made opportunity to practice it, you're likely rusty at best. Maybe you played an instrument or played a sport when you were younger. And if you haven't been doing that, you start to lose the ability to retrieve those memories, not the memories themselves. So we remember what we practice remembering. And the concept from cognitive psychology is retrieval practice, pulling that stuff back out of our heads. So I tell my students part of what we're doing with learning is putting information in, connecting new to old. But another part is pulling it back out. Unfortunately, our teachers aren't going to just open up our heads and go, oh, yep, Alicia knows what's going on here, so she doesn't have to take the test. Nope, that's not how it's going to work. So we work on retrieval practice. And from cognitive psychology, many would say this is the number one effective learning strategy. So I often tell my students, if you don't listen to anything else I say, please do this. If you're not going to do any of the other stuff, please do this because it really does matter. So some strategies for retrieval practice, self-quizzing. The more they can self-quiz, the better. For a couple of reasons. One, they're creating the quiz, so they're having to think through, even if they're not recognizing it, the different levels of Bloom's. They're having to create these questions. So there's learning happening there. And then when they take the quiz, they're also having to recall the answer to the question or the answers to the question. Many of our ideas are pretty complex and it's not just one straightforward answer all the time. If we move down this little chart, then study groups. Study groups can become hugely important because if I've got 4 people and we each create a quiz, now we're going to trade them and maybe you saw it differently than I did and you chose different area to focus than I did, and now we've got even more going on. Teaching others, the more we're teaching others, the more I have to recall that information. I have to retrieve the information and then convey it in a way that it makes sense to other people. Probably my students' favorite is brain dumps. They love to do brain dumps, and brain dumps are exactly what they sound like. We get a topic and we dump out everything we know about that topic. The key to all of these is no notes. You cannot use your notes when you're doing retrieval practice. You have to do it without, and here's why. So when a student does a brain dump, for example, they write down, I give them 2 minutes to write down everything they can think of about whatever the topic is that I've given them. Then they bring in their notes, and in a different color with a line, somehow differentiating, they fill in, oh yeah, I forgot that, or I got that wrong. They correct and add to that brain dump they did. Then they can see the gaps. If I study with my notes all of the time, you, all of us will continually study the things we already know because it makes us feel good. Oh, I'm smart. You are smart. but there are gaps. You don't know everything. And inevitably, some of those things that you have gaps in are going to show up on the exam. So by doing brain dumps, by doing self-quizzes, we see where our gaps are. And then I guide the students to study those areas. And I've watched many, many students over the years, if we're doing the 5-day study plan, and we're going to look at that in the next little section here, they will realize, oh, here are my gaps. They'll study those gaps, and the next day when they do the brain dump, more of it is in the original color. And the next day, more of it is in the original color, and they have fewer and fewer gaps because they're studying those up. So retrieval practice is hugely, hugely important. We talk about in class, how do we teach and reinforce? What is retrieval? That we're better together, those study groups, the muscle memory examples. We don't have to retrieve when it's in our muscle memory. We talk about how much practice matters. It's often difficult for students to transfer knowledge, skills, and understanding from one context into another. So we do that very explicitly, and we do inspected practice. I have a chemistry colleague who he's been teaching chemistry for a long time, and always would tell students for that basic first level of Bloom's, use some flashcards, make sure you understand the terms before you start trying to apply and analyze and all the things. And he realized that many students weren't making the flashcards. So he started making them turn in their flashcards, and they would get points for their flashcards. Well, then he realized they were just turning them in right at the end of the semester when he required them. And he was like, nope, that's not going to work. So he said, we're going to turn them in before each exam. Well, then he realized they were making the flashcards right before the exam just to get the points. Nope, that's not going to work. So now he has them submit their flashcards weekly, so that he can see that at least, yes, they have made these, they have these in hand. Whether or not they use them, that's a different story. That's on the students. We can't resolve all of the issues at one time, but making sure we're reinforcing by inspecting. And finally, as much as I would love to have an easy button for this and make it different, learning takes time. It just does. We have to give time. If you're teaching accelerated classes, this gets really, really tricky because learning takes time, and we often are shortening that time, and it can be very, very difficult then for brains to hold on to the information. One thing I know works from cognitive psychology that I use with students is this idea of spaced practice. So the 5-day study plan is an excellent example of spaced practice, along with retrieval practice and some other concepts from cognitive psychology. But the 5-day study plan gives time to learn, hold on to some of it, sleep, forget some of it, relearn, hold on to more of it, sleep, forget some of it. It gives us time for our brains to hold on to these pieces and to review them and go over them and make sure we've got what we need. And so basically you break a study guide or whatever is going to be on an exam, for example, into 4 parts. Part A is the earliest part, the part you learned longest ago or went over longest ago in class. And 5 days before a test, you study part A for 30 minutes, take a break, a short break. I always tell the students that doesn't mean get on Netflix. You don't start playing Fortnite. You do some push-ups, some jumping jacks, drink a little water, maybe eat some sugar, and you go back. So you do 2 sessions, because we know that we need a little break. The students who say, well, I studied for 4 hours. Yeah, but your brain didn't, because that's not what brains do. So a 30 break 30, then 4 days they study part B. 5 days before is only part A. 4 days before is part B for a 30 break 30, and then they self-quiz retrieval practice over part A, looking for those gaps. 3 days before, we come to the next section, study part C, 30 break 30, self-quiz over B, self-quiz over A, finding the gaps. So I know what I need to go back over. 2 days before, we finally get to the newest stuff, maybe the stuff you're still teaching in class, and 30 break 30, then they self-quiz over the other parts, and not until the day before the exam do they bring all of them together. We want to stay very focused in this. Until the day before, then we interleave, we put all of these parts together, 30 break 30, another one if you need it, and then we rest and we relax. And we don't pull an all-nighter, and we're not trying to cram things in because we know that we can trust our practice, that we're ready for this exam. So we use the 5-day study plan in teaching and reinforcing this. We explain forgetting that just how it takes time and what that process kind of looks like. Again, when we're explaining these theories, it's all at a very basic level. They don't need to understand the depth of schema theory, for example. They just need to understand there's a file folder up there. When we're teaching and reinforcing this, practice matters, again, talking about practice and explicitly helping them transfer, and then inspected practice. So I would leave you with what one strategy, just one, can you apply from today to move students toward becoming expert learners? Just choose one. Think about how this fits into what you're already doing, because you're doing some amazing things in your classes. How do we help our students get a little closer to becoming expert learners? Often it really is that they just don't even know that there's actual research behind how people learn. They don't realize this is a field of study. And if we can give them just one little strategy, and then inspect that strategy to help them hold themselves accountable. I always tell students, I cannot hold you accountable, but I can help you hold yourself accountable. So the strategies I used today, I had some learning activities in here, counting the vowels. We would do the ABC 3-2-1, the Goldilocks. When I do this in person, I do a think, write, pair, share. And I want to stop there for just a second. Many of us do think, pair, share, but unfortunately what ends up happening is we kind of skip the think. We give a topic and then say, all right, turn to somebody next to you and tell them, use a timer to hold yourself accountable, to give them the think. And then I love to include the write, because especially your students who maybe are a little more introverted, not feeling super confident, they're writing something down. So then when they pair, they actually have something to say. And when students say, well, Michelle, I don't have anything to say. What did you write down? Say that. I showed you a what, why, how. I gave you an advanced organizer, which is a type of concept map, told you quickly and showed you examples of dual coding. I talked about retrieval practice, space practice, and the importance of modeling and then inspecting these things. Here are resources. Feel free to take a look at those. And I have given you my contact information. I'm going to look at questions here in just a second. Please, 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 and I know lots of presenters say this, but I really do mean it. Reach out. Let's keep this conversation going. When you start trying to apply these things, please reach out and let me, be a brain to help kind of think about the situation you're in and what you're trying to do. When I love to be able to take advantage of that. And so I always appreciate that when I am at a conference. And I love when people do reach out, because often, and this is so selfish, I learn from them something new in a different way to apply some of these things. So let me look through really quickly. I do see in the chat, I'm sorry if this was already stated, I came in late. Yeah, you will indeed have access to the slide deck. No mind meld. Bob asked. Bob, talk to me about mind meld here.
Oh, you're not a Star Trek fan?
Sure.
Spock and the mind
We're
meld.
not quite there. Although the students sometimes I think that we're there. So like if I just sleep on my book or something, I'll just stay. If I go to office hours but don't ask any questions, that's good. All right. Are there any questions? Bob, what is there's our greeting. What is
Uh,
the process for the slide deck to be made available?
well, if you do want to share it, send it to me and
Yep.
I'll post it on just like it says more on for each session. For your session, I'd also put a PowerPoint link to the slide deck, and they could just go there and download it, whoever wants it. If that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So just send it
Absolutely.
to me and
Mhm.
I'll take care of it.
Perfect. All right, other questions, folks?
Oh, and Barbara says not all sessions have a more link. You're correct because some slacker presenters haven't provided the information to put there. So shame on
Thank
them.
you all. Will the recording be in the same place? They're asking, Bob.
Uh, yes, today's recording, you'll see on the schedule of sessions, when the recording's available, it'll say view recording instead of join session. And that link will take you directly to that recording. Also, it'll be in the YouTube channel list with all the others if you just want to search around.
Right. There we have it. Thank you all for listening today. And I will be at Teaching Professor Conference in June in Washington, D.C. If anybody's there, make sure you stop and say hi. I don't remember what I'm presenting on there, but something. It'll be fun and interesting for us to look at. So yeah, I would love to meet up for lunch or whatever. All right. Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you, Michelle. Really appreciate it. I learned things. So, hey, great.
Great. Thank you.